Alrighty, using the QuickCapture feature for this particular one, so there will be no editing, so expect perhaps some more mistakes. Anyways, just got done watching UFC 94. I haven't checked on the undercard belt, or not. No, that was 93, pardon me, 93. Henderson versus Franklin. Did not look at the results of the undercard, so I will not comment on them, aside from the one undercard fight that we got to see. Which I'll start with just because it was on the undercard. The Irish versus British match, which, you know, is required on any Irish card. Tom Egan of Ireland, apparently a native of Dublin, versus John Hathaway of the UK. And John Hathaway parts of John Hathaway's game looked pretty damn impressive. We didn't get to see his striking, so we don't know what that looks like. But his wrestling looked very good for a Brit. He was relentless, like, he was on Egan from the sound of the bell until he got pulled off finally. He showed pretty decent grappling, although, I mean, it's hard to tell because we don't really know what Egan's grappling's like. And, I mean, he's very young, though, so there is a very bright future in store for him. But anyways, he got the win by TKO at the end of the first round. He had Egan mounted and was pounding away. He was more impressive than I expected him to be, but I also expected a submission, I think. Can't recall. This was one of the fights that didn't overly stand out to me. Alright, and then the main card opened up with Marcus Davis, Chris Lytle. This was probably the fight of the night. An argument can be made for Henderson versus Franklin, but excuse me. This was definitely up there. It was they stuck to the gentleman's agreement to stand the whole time, and basically you saw that Chris Lytle's kind of come out of his shell since losing to Matt Serra and Matt Hughes a little bit, but I think he's gone out a little too far, if you know what I mean. He seems to have lost a lot of his technical polish, and we saw that in the Paul Taylor fight also particularly. And Davis was very technical boxing, and basically he just basically outboxed him. Lytle did more damage in many respects. He had him in trouble twice, but I just didn't. It was a solid fight, and it was a very good fight. It could have been better though had Lytle not been so much take his head off and be a little more technical boxing and kept his cardio a little longer. But it was a good fight. Marcus Davis won I think it was a UD. It might have been a split. I think it was a split now that I think about it. Then we had, I think next up was Alan Belcher, Dennis Kang. I can't remember the exact order at times. Belcher, Kang. Kang looked very good in this fight up until the end of it, which I'll get to, but his striking looked on point. He was connecting pretty well with Belcher, outstriking Belcher, which was a pretty good thing. He was winning pretty much everything up until the end of the fight. He could take down Belcher, which is something that's been proved pretty hard to do, and he out-grappled him fairly easily, but he got guillotined near the end of the second round. And unfortunately, this is something I keep seeing about Dennis Kang. We saw it with the Gegard Mousasi fight too. He doesn't. I think he's lulled into this false sense of confidence on the ground. Not that he's not better than Mousasi and Belcher, but he doesn't see. It's like he doesn't see the submissions coming. He doesn't expect them to try to submit him. That's a little weird. Also, just a side thing. On the time of bringing this in, Dennis Kang, of course, Dana White is famous for saying Dennis Kang is not UFC material. Back shortly after the purchase of Pride, and then he goes off and he loses to Yoshihiro Akiyama in devastating fashion, and he goes off and loses to Gegard Mousasi in really terrible fashion, and then they sign him. And call me a conspiracy theorist or an anti-UFC guy if you want, or Pride nuthooker, but the timing just continues to be that whole thing of, I still think the UFC loves the idea of bringing in Pride guys who are kind of on the downturn or are struggling with something, whatever it is, and giving them fights and having them lose and keeps making Pride the horse. But it's a theory, and it's good business practice in a lot of ways. Although not so much. I mean, I think there's still a lot of Pride fighters that they could really, really market. like Hellboy and well, Gomi would have been a good idea. Although Gomi at this point is crap. He's fighting like utter crap. But moving on, we had Jeremy Horn versus Husamar Taquinho Parhales. Jeremy Horn, mad balls. He looked like a lot of people were calling for him to retire, and I was among them. But damn, Jeremy Horn, impressive outing. Even though you lost, even though you generally got really tooled for a lot of the fight, but you mounted Parhales. You showed heart. You would not let him get into submissions on you. Still, you know, a keen loss, and I do believe Jeremy Horn is still not the feared, vaunted fighter he once was. But that being said, I would actually like to see him fight in the UFC again now. Husamar, usual things. Keep working on the striking, keep working on the conditioning, because both look terrible. But the grappling, he has that pretty much down pat. Like, they call him Stump, and man, you don't get him off you. Although he did get mounted, which was surprising. Moving on, we have... This was when the Coleman Shogun fight came in, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Shogun is still not the Shogun that was the best in the world, and I've said this multiple times. I've said it repetitively. He looked bad his last couple of fights in Pride. He looked bad against Forrest Griffin. He looked bad in this fight. He looked terrible in this fight. He gassed out with Coleman not really making him work all that much. And that's all that can be said about that, really. You got to think, and I mean, they had the training videos up of him and everything, and how, you know, it looked like he was training hard finally. And his cardio's still not there, and I don't get it. Moving on, talking about Coleman. Coleman wants a third fight. You know, if Shogun fights that way again, I could see Coleman potentially beating him. If Shogun fights anywhere near as potentially should easily win, but he did not today. He had that omoplata, and he really didn't commit to it, which was weird. Coleman's wrestling looked pretty good, actually. He was landing the jab. He looked pretty good in the first round, actually. But he gassed terribly again. That's just the Coleman hallmark. And Phil Baroni's cornering with crap. That being said, I think he needed to build up Coleman, so I think in some ways he was doing the right thing, but in others, I would not want a cornerman to do that, to mislead me in such a manner. And then we had the main event, Dan Henderson, Rich Franklin. This was an excellent fight. Much like, you know, a lot of the, you know, Pride champ versus UFC champs, it's coming a little too late. Like Vanderlei Chuck would have been a much bigger fight had it happened before, and in the same way, Dan Henderson versus Franklin would have been a huge fight, you know, before the rise of Anderson Silva. But it was still a great fight. Dan Henderson showed he could take Rich down semi at will. Rich showed he had improved in the clinch, and I would say he outstruck Dan Henderson a little bit. He got taken. And basically, I agree with the decision, although what is Chris Watts smoking? 30-27 for Franklin. Oh, God. Oh, God. I never agree with that guy's decision calls. That's the weird thing. I don't know what he sees. I don't know his background. I don't know the guy, but, oh, he is a terrible judge. But, yeah, Dan Henderson looked good in this fight. He will coach Team USA now. There's a lot of rumors about how the UK team is really, really weak. I just don't see Bisping making them any better, so the American team will probably do pretty well. But you never know. I mean, there's only one winner. Because I think they're doing one weight class, if I recall correctly. Do you have anything else to add? No, that's about it. As far as thoughts on the fights are, I mean, go watch them. It was a good night of fights. Leon Roberts, the referee in the Taquinho Horn fight, was pretty impressive, actually. I would like to see him get more refereeing calls over certain other refs, like Dan Merliotta and Kevin Mulhall. Kevin Mulhall, of course, called for an illegal knee strike on Shogun that actually hit Coleman in the chest and thus was legal. So he was the bad ref of the evening. Anyways, that's all I have to say.